The topic of my talk today will be what can we learn from copyright in action for copyright reform. But before I dive into the details of the law in the books and the law in action, let me start with a short prologue and give you 3 quotes, all from the same author, that in a way may help to set the scene for what I'm going to talk about. The first one is, the growth of intellectual property in recent years has been uncontrolled to the point of recklessness. In the same article, the copyright law seemed suddenly to metastasize, and the field of intellectual property can begin to resemble a game of conceptual Pac-Man in which everything in sight is being gobbled up. So when you read these quotes, I assume that many of you would think that this is an accurate description of what we have observed over the last 20 or 30 years when it comes to international treaties and national legislation in the field, in the realm of copyright law. The funny thing, though, is that the author of the text where I took these quotes from is David Lang, and his classic article on recognizing the public domain has been published in 1981. 1981 means years before US joined Berne. It means decades before the trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights treaty and the WIPO copyright treaties had taken into effect and had been implemented into national copyright laws. So when I first read this article and saw these quotes, it reminded me of a concept that was first developed by David Pauly in the context of environmental psychology, looking at the depletion of fisheries. And he was speaking about shifting baseline effects. And in a more organizational theory context, Sayers and Arroyo, they define shifting baseline effects as intergenerational changes in perception of the state of the environment. As one generation replaces another, people's perception of what is natural change, even to the extent that they no longer believe historical anecdotes of past abundance and size of species. And David Lang's article illustrates, to me at least, that I would say we can observe a shifting baseline effect in intellectual property rights in general and copyright in particular, because I think, and I would argue, we cannot even imagine, we cannot even envision how the much less restrictive IP regimes of the past have worked. And I would say the perception of what a natural level of copyright protection looks like has changed. What we think today as being a natural level of protection would have looked completely, utterly insane to David Lang in 1981, when you look at the article that he wrote at that time. And this brings me to my first point. A very short view, because I suppose there are a lot of people in the room that know more and better about copyright in the books than I do. So I just want to give you, for my main argument that I want to make, what I would perceive as being the cornerstones of copyright in the books as it is right now. And I would say one cornerstone is, as you're well aware, that copyright is awarded automatically with the creation of the work. And if you want to use any copyright protected work, you have to clear the rights in each individual case with each individual right holder. That's the default. Yeah. Second, at the latest, since also the USA have joined Berne, we can say that all those countries have agreed that there must not be any registration requirements, or in the words of the Berne Convention, the enjoyment and the exercise of these rights shall not be subject to any formality. Yeah? There is some debate under critical copyright scholars that say, nevertheless, there is still some workaround and we could introduce, and maybe after the end of the minimum protection period we could, and you know what I'm talking about, but the default rule is no registration requirements. And what we also could observe over the last years is an ever longer protection terms that have been extended time and time again, even retroactively. So I would say these three are pillars, of course there are others, are typical for the copyright regime we are dealing with. But let me now try to illustrate what this copyright in the books means for certain different types of use cases. Use cases meaning if you are a creator, a user of copyrighted works and you want to do something with those, how's the situation in different cases? And let me start with this matrix. And let's think about you want to use a copyrighted work in small parts for creating a new work. For example, in course of remix and sampling. What you have to do is you have to clear the rights in the individual case, otherwise it's prohibited. If you want to do this on a private and not-for-profit website, such as your personal blog. If you want to publish your remix that you did for private purposes, so to share it with your friends and family on a commercial platform such as YouTube or Twitter, it's, at least by the letter of the law, also prohibited without clearing copyrights. And of course, if you want to use your remix for commercial, for-profit purposes, you have to clear copyrights in an individual case with each rights holder. If you want to use a work as a whole in creating a new work, such as background music on your personal blog, of course it's prohibited without clearing copyrights. If you want to upload a work where it's a background music, you also on a commercial platform, again, prohibited without clearing the rights individually. And of course, for commercial purposes, the same thing. And you get it if you want to just use the whole work without even creating a new work, so some illustrative usage of the work. Yeah, you get the idea. So actually, and this is, I would say, one of the, if you imagine, when you talk to other people about copyright law, they often say, oh, it's so complicated, and you know, I don't know what to do. But actually, when you look at those different use cases, it's very easy. Yeah? You're not allowed to do anything without clearing the rights individually with each rights holder, and as you are well aware of, that's difficult because you even finding out who are the different rights holders are is not so easy after all. So that's in a way the situation that we are facing when we're looking at copyright in the books, but and I will come back to this later. If we followed the law to the letter, this would mean that we would face an empty YouTube platform, for example. But that's not the case. So obviously, copyright in action is different. Copyright as we are experiencing it in practice is different. It's different, first of all, in the perception of users, users of copyrighted materials. There has been this great tracker study by the British Office of Communication, Ofcom, that found out that 44% of all internet users aged 12 and older claim to be either not particularly confident or not at all confident in terms of what is legal and what isn't online. So actually, it's not so easy after all, at least in the perception of users, it's not easy. What they are allowed to do and what they are not allowed to do online. And it's not just ordinary users, and some of the German colleagues in the audience may know this example already very well because it's my favorite one. But I think I have here in this international audience another example to show you that it's not just a question that ordinary users are struggling with. And at the same time, this example that I'm going to show you now illustrates, as I would say, perfectly what's wrong with the current copyright law. It's a video that has been produced. It's actually just the last 30 seconds of a 2-minute long video that has been produced by the IG Metall, Germany's largest trade union. And they produced this video in 2013 or 12, I'm not entirely sure, I think 2013, prior to the general federal election in Germany. There are some. There are some lines of text that I will try to translate as we go. So, let's start. So new coalitions arise. It's time to bang on the table. Pull yourself together. Everyone, go to the election. Go vote.
So, jetzt können wir weiter diskutieren.
So now we can continue our discussion. So this video was shared online via YouTube, of course, and it was a huge success. So millions of people watched this ad that wanted to encourage people to go to the polls. And that's not, what happens usually to political ads by trade unions. Actually, it never happens to political ads by trade unions or even political parties. So it was very successful, but also thinking of yesterday's discussion with regard to exceptions of parody and satire, it's obviously not a parody, and it's obviously not a satire. Yeah? It's a political ad. It's a mobilizing ad. So the conventional exceptions, at least according to also litigation in Germany, also for quotation exceptions and as well, they cannot be applied. And I will be forever grateful to this anonymous YouTube user who then asked the question to the editorial office of the IG Metall and asked them, how actually did you clear the rights for this great video? I would like to know. And IG Metall was very service-oriented and answered, and this is my translation, of course we don't have any special rights. We only use free YouTube material. And the YouTube terms allow anyone to use, to reproduce, and to create derivative works, including their public display on YouTube for free. For more, see here in the YouTube terms. Best regards, the online editorial office of the IG Metall. So I don't need to explain to you that that's very service-oriented, friendly, nice, and wrong. And so, of course, even if the YouTube terms applied, and even if they could allow you to do all this stuff, that's not the case for all material that you find on YouTube, because most of the material on YouTube actually is not, at least of a lot of the material that has been used also in this video, has not been shared by the rights holders. And if it has not been shared or had not been uploaded with permission of the rights holders, they have not, of course, agreed to YouTube's terms. Actually, briefly after the election, IG Metall pulled the video from their YouTube channel, so it's not available anymore from the official IG Metall YouTube channel, but of course, you'll find it on YouTube. It's still up there. But, I'm not telling you this story to make fun of IG Metall. I'm just trying to make a case that even highly professional users, full-time online editorial offices, they struggle with what they are allowed to do and what they're not. And it's not a phenomenon that, bothers some rare exceptional users on YouTube, but it's a phenomenon that bothers millions of users. And this is something that can be evidenced when you look at the search for the specific phrase "no copyright infringement" or "no copyright intended" on YouTube. What you find or get is millions of videos where the uploaders, they made the video with their with their smartphone, or they wanted to, just share a short clip of a favorite show and maybe redub it or something like that. And they write, I don't want to claim copyright. No copyright intended. Of course, that's not how copyright works in the books. But when you look at YouTube, that's how it works for a lot of people. That's how they think copyright works. That's copyright in practice. But even further, let me conclude this series on, I would say, some kind of regulatory uncertainty in the realm of copyright law. Because now we kind of laugh at the IG Metall because, we are copyright experts. We are the experts. We know that, that was not true what IG Metall said. But when you look more closely, I think you should also ask, do the experts know? Do copyright experts know? And in that regard, let's look at high-level, very prominent cases. And what we find is that it's very difficult, and it has been very difficult, and it still is very difficult, to predict in advance what actually the law means, what the results in some cases will be. And so, for example, there have been very prominent services, platforms online, that have been litigated out of business, such as Napster or LimeWire, in spite of a substantial portion, of course there was a substantial portion of, even overwhelming portion of infringing usage practices on these platforms, but there was also a substantial portion of non-infringing practices. And no one would deny that you could use a file-sharing platform such as LimeWire or Napster also for perfectly legitimate uses. And when you look at BitTorrent, for example, more and more corporations are using it. Even Microsoft is using it to distribute updates, because it spares bandwidth, it's cheaper, and it's faster. On the other hand, we have cases where the service has been declared legal in spite of substantial portion of infringing practices. When you look at YouTube, there's a huge amount of videos, and there are no numbers on that, but the numbers that I heard is up to 40–50% of all videos are, in a way, in some way, potentially infringing copyright. But YouTube is still up and running, and it's not only up and running, it's hugely successful. And let me now focus for the remainder of my look at copyright in action on the issue of music and music streaming and the role of YouTube in that context. Because most of all, when you read in the news about the current battle of streaming platforms, you read about Spotify, Apple Music, and Tidal, for example. But the actual market leader, when it comes to both the available repertoire as well as usage and market share in terms of usage, in the realm of music streaming, is YouTube, and it's still YouTube, even though this survey has been undertaken prior to the launch of Apple Music. But Apple Music is even behind Spotify, so this hasn't changed the overall picture, meaning that when we come to the streaming of music, the major platform that is used is YouTube. And it's not everything, it's not remunerated what's happening there. And fellow colleague, and I'm sure well known to everyone in this audience, Paul Hield, made this great analysis of YouTube as a music library. And what he did is, he looked at the views of #1 hits from the USA, France, and Brazil from 1930 to 1960. So the songs that have been #1 hits in these three countries between 1930 and 1960. And he looked up whether they were available on YouTube, and actually most of those were available, nearly anyone. So I would say YouTube is as close as we get to the often cited celestial jukebox that we will come. Any music ever published available at your fingertips. That's what YouTube is, effectively, everywhere except Germany. And we'll come back to this as well. So you have all those #1 hits of these three countries online. And what he checked was whether those YouTube videos have been monetized, meaning whether there were ads placed in front of the videos. And what he found was that the majority of views in all these three countries were monetized, both in the US, in France, and in Brazil. And now the funny thing is, of all those videos, at least to the knowledge that they could find out, 95% of those videos have not been uploaded by the rights holders. They have been uploaded by, YouTube user XY20, and all these different, users. And you could say, okay, but maybe that's just because they were not fast enough in deleting those. No. The average period, not the average, the median time that these songs have been online is 4 years. What does this tell you? This tells you that with knowledge of rights holders, a lot of people are publishing content of these rights holders. Rights holders use YouTube's content ID system to check whether their content is online, and in the majority of cases, they then start to monetize those views, or at least to a substantial proportion, they do this. This is not a very recent phenomenon, but what is more recent a phenomenon is how YouTube, in a way, built on this combination of enforcement and monetization that their content ID algorithm offers. Because what actually that's, I would say, is the major innovation that YouTube provides is to offer some kind of service that combines copyright enforcement with monetization and remuneration. And what they recently launched was the YouTube audio library together with the with the music policy register. Because previously it was the case that you could upload your video using content that you obviously did not own and that you obviously did not clear the rights for, such as, adding the most recent Rihanna song to your smartphone video. But you never knew whether YouTube would accept the upload or whether it would be blocked or what would happen to it. So what YouTube did, or Google did, it introduced this music policy library. It lets you check in advance any song that you can think of, search for it, and if you find it, and that's very likely, specifically if it's a popular song, and I've done this for Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift is my favorite example because she pulled her songs from Spotify because she doesn't agree with, kostenlos Kultur, we would say in Germany, she thinks music should not be used for free. But on YouTube, you can use all your songs for free and put them in the background of your video as a playback, or you even can perform a cover. If you use it as playback, it's viewable everywhere except Germany. If you perform it as a cover, it's viewable worldwide. So even in Germany, you can cover Taylor Swift and put it online. But in both cases, ads can appear. Yeah? So in both cases, it's not sure that there will be ads, but ads can appear because the rights holders, in that case, the rights holders of the songs of Taylor Swift, have decided to leave all those music online and to at least in part monetize those. So when we look at how YouTube works, and it obviously works. It works. I'm not saying it works in terms of a fair share of remuneration is distributed. Of course not. But let's be honest. For which part of the music industry would anyone be confident to say that? But when we look at what I've just described, how the YouTube content ID system works, and we then go back to copyright in the books, rights clearing in each individual case, with each individual rights holder, no registration requirements, and ever longer protection terms, what we find at YouTube, or what I would call the YouTube copyright, which is actually what we are dealing with here, the YouTube copyright is very simple. It means you have a one-stop shop. If you want to play safe and not risk that you receive a costly letter from a lawyer, but you still want to publish worldwide a video using content by very popular artists, and you have not the means or the resources to clear the rights, then your best way to do that is go to upload your video to YouTube. The second thing is, there's actually a mandatory registration for rights holders. Because if they want to enforce their copyright, or if they want to monetize their copyright, they have to register their works in YouTube's content ID system, and most of large rights holders in the world have done so. So they have provided YouTube with their content so that they can check, so that the content ID algorithm can automatically check whether some content has been uploaded, and this effectively, and this relates, I would say, to term lengths, this effectively leads to a use it or lose it clause. Because if you are saying, no, I abstain, I don't want to register with YouTube, this means that there's no enforcement. So this means that your content, or the content that you have rights over, will be published and will be used on YouTube without your knowledge and without you earning any monetization whatsoever. So in a way, the YouTube copyright is very, 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 very different to what the law in the books would suggest copyright should look like. This brings me to my conclusion, and I got an epilogue in spare. I would say the most funny, I would say the irony of the whole copyright debate that, as I'm sure you're all very aware of, has been very emotional over the last year is, when you look at that, YouTube and Google and probably other similarly large players, they're the ones that managed to make a business case out of the impossibility to clear rights according to the law in the books. The law in the books obviously doesn't work online, and what YouTube and Google offers is a workaround. They offer a workaround. And so the funny thing and the irony, I would say, is that while, specifically in Germany, Google is the evil anti-copyright warrior, effectively Google and YouTube is the one which can perfectly live with copyright as is. So I would even go as far to, maybe some bit provocatively, say that without reform, Google wins. Because they need not be scared, and I say Google wins specifically because it's very difficult for any other competitor to reproduce the same content ID system due to network effects. Maybe there will be 2 or 3 others that can convince rights holders to also register their works at another database. Or maybe sometimes YouTube will be forced to open up to their content ID database to competitors. We don't know. But nevertheless, today, if you want to stay safe in terms of notice and takedown, if you want to keep your content up, you have to go to YouTube, and you are allowed to do stuff on YouTube that you are not allowed to do anywhere else outside of large commercial platforms online. Maybe Facebook could be a similar host, but as you all know, Facebook has not a similar content ID monetization mechanism. At the same time, I would argue that YouTube shows the way for copyright reform. So this brings me back to the title of my talk, when I say let's learn from copyright in action for copyright reform. And I would say what we can learn from YouTube is, because when someone comes and says, we need a rights registry, yeah? And we need a use it or lose it clause, yeah? And we need a one-stop shop, then, oh no, that's impossible. You can't do that. Bern forbids registration. Yeah? If you want, in a room like this, normally if you say, I want rights registration, people say, stop listening to you, because he's a dreamer, because it's in Bern. Yeah, it's in the Bern Convention, yeah, and we cannot change Bern. Yeah, except Google did. And except what we have is, we have registration, it is working, we have a one-stop shop, it is working, and we have use or lose it, and it is working. And that's actually the law in practice, that's the law in action that we observe today. Yeah? But the problem is, since it's only YouTube's law and not copyright law, it's anti-competitive. Yeah, the problem is outside of this platform, for all the others, for individual, for private users, they don't have the resources of YouTube, and so for them, actually, it's not an option. They can either abide to YouTube or they can forget about it. That's the situation that we are facing, and that's why I would argue that without reform, Google wins. And now, let me come to an end with a short epilogue that brings me back to my initial matrix, because, of course, as it is right now, the YouTube Content ID system also only works, and that's another caveat, it only works with the easy cases. What are the easy cases? The easy cases are when you use one work in parts or entirely for one video. The easy cases are when you are not engaging into remix and sampling in more, or mashups in more difficult, or more difficult to track ways. And the easy cases are when you are just using music and you produce your own video, and you are not, for example, remixing different sequences of films. Because in all these cases that I just mentioned, Content ID, it's too complex, it's too complicated, and maybe Content ID will be able to also deal with such use cases, but I would say for a lot of the most creative works online, also on YouTube, Content ID is a very imperfect solution. So I think even the 3 points that I mentioned before, use it or lose it, one-stop shop, and a register would not be sufficient for solving some of the most pressing copyright problems that we are facing. I think we still need something that we discussed a lot yesterday, which is, I'm glad that I did not focus my talk on. Yesterday there was the discussion, do we need some kind of fair use, some kind of general limitation, general exception, or whatever. Colleagues of mine and myself, we like to speak of a right to remix. Yeah? But in a way, it's all the same thing, what we are talking about. It's like we need to harmonize copyright exceptions in Europe and then add an open norm that allows some flexibility in the realm of rights and exceptions, and that allows some forms of this remix mashup creativity that we find so much online, but all outside of some forms of all outside of legal ways to monetize, to distribute, and so on. And then, and this is my last slide, if you come back to, if we had, some of these YouTube copyright provisions transferred into law, and then we add such a general exception, bagatelle, or remix limitation to our copyright law, we would end up at a reformed copyright that asking the same questions that I asked in the beginning maybe would not look so simple anymore, but would be more more usable, more in line with copyright in action. Still, if you want to use a whole work for commercial or for-profit purposes, it would be prohibited without clearing the rights individually. Of course, I think nobody wants to change that. But if you want to use only small parts in creating a new work, it should be possible to do this even for commercial, for-profit purposes, as long as you are, paying a fee at the collecting society, just as it is possible with covers today. That's why I also showed you the Taylor Swift example of YouTube's audio library, where it says you can use Taylor Swift as playback everywhere except Germany, and you can even perform a cover of Taylor Swift even in Germany. And you can do that because you are legally allowed to do cover versions, as long as you pay pay a share of your remuneration to a collecting society. So it's a very easy way to do, and if the rights holders are members of a collecting society, they can't prohibit you to do that. When we talk about using the whole work for private purpose on a commercial platform, I would say there should be a notice free of charge and then compensation by the platform if it stays online. If you use it as a whole for a new work, there should also be a compensation by the platform, but it should be legal definitely due to the remix or general bagatelle exemption. And if you use only very small parts for private purposes, it should be legal due to a reformed quotation or remix exception. If you use works privately for a non-profit website, such as your personal blog, as a whole, I think there should be some system that it's not so expensive as it is, for example, in Germany today. Some kind of notice and takedown with a capped fee in case of repeat infringement, means like a parking ticket. If you use it as a whole for a new work, it should be legal to remix exemption, due to a remix exception, probably combined with a lump sum compensation. The same is true for small parts of creating a new work. So as you see, it's not so easy. Not everything is red anymore, but much more is green. And so with such, it's not a complete overhaul of copyright. Actually, I think it would be in its effects. But what the end would be just to have the law in the books more in line with the law in action as we can observe it, and getting rid of some of the downsides of this current law in action, which in a way is very beneficial to very few large platform providers. Thank you.